So if you've been following my channel by now, you probably know I'm not a very superstitious person. If anything, I'm kind of hyper-rational. But there's a classic arcade on the Santa Monica Pier out here in Los Angeles that outside that arcade, there is an old electromechanical Zoltar machine. Kind of like the one from the old Tom Hanks movie Big. And Zoltar is a fortune teller box where you walk up to Zoltar, you feed him $1, and he prints you out a ticket. On that ticket is a fortune. And it's randomized what fortune you get. It's kind of like a fortune cookie. And one day I go up to Zoltar, feed him my $1, I prints out my fortune, I look at it, and I say, no, I don't like this random draw that I got. So you know what I do? I put it in the trash can next to Zoltar, feed Zoltar another $1, he hands me another fortune, and I say, yes, now we're talking, this is the fortune that I want to keep. That's where this fortune I'm holding on right now came from. And while that might seem a little bit absurd, it speaks to the point today, which is that there's no actual rule when there's a probability for that kind of thing that you only get to do it once. That this is something that in the realm of business, we often have to deal with probabilities. This is something that if someone was a project manager, a producer, an executive, marketing team, they'll know when they deal with these things kind of daily that they do their best estimates, they figure out plans to mitigate, what if this falls through. But oftentimes if we come to it more from the craft side, maybe we're engineers, we might come from the realm, and I've talked about this before, where there's a deterministic rigor to it, that if I follow the right steps, there is some sort of optimal algorithm for performance or for RAM or for some other kind of form of measure of efficiency. Or like if I was a statics physics engineer, I might be able to prove that a certain arrangement of materials in a certain configuration with certain kinds of joinery would bear a certain amount of weight. Guaranteed. Business is a lot more squishy than that. And part of what makes it squishy is that there's people involved. And when you apply for jobs or if you apply for promotions or certainly if you ever work for yourself, even if you're not a business person in the fundamental sense of a project manager, producer, executive kind of person, you're still engaging in a business activity by virtue of applying for the job, applying for the promotion, or working for yourself. In a way, it's a mechanism of sales in which you're having to try to sell yourself. And part of sales is that there's always probability involved because not everybody's your customer. Not everybody's in the mood, the mode, the tone, the situation where they want what you have to sell, which in those cases is, frankly, yourself and your current skills. And so there's always probability involved. What happens sometimes is if we come from a deterministic field and we apply for something and we don't get it, we start to blame ourselves. We say, well, didn't I follow the right steps? Should I have done something different? And I'm not saying you shouldn't learn from the opportunity and somehow improve yourself to improve the odds next time. Hopefully you can. But it is to say that you can do everything right in applying for a job or applying for promotion, still have it not work out. Or you can do everything wrong and sometimes it still works out anyway for reasons that are hard to put your finger on because there's people involved in making those decisions. As a hypothetical, let's say that there's a dozen of us who are applying to work at a game company. They have a level design position for game designers, and that's all they can say. They're kind of being secretive. They don't want to tell yet what property they're working on because they're not ready to announce it to the public. Now, we find out after the fact that our friend out of the 12 of us who applied, Jerry, got the job. And what we realized a little bit later is, oh, the job was actually for an RTS sci-fi game, which maybe my portfolio didn't match up as well with, but Jerry had background in both sci-fi and RTS. They couldn't have publicly acknowledged that because they didn't want to give leads to the press as to what they're producing. So from the outside, we had no way to know. It was essentially raw, independent, pure probability of things we couldn't know from the outside. And the same thing happens all the time. You might apply someplace, and the considerations that they're deciding on might have nothing to do with whether or not you did anything right or wrong. It could have entirely to do with some other kind of factor that is outside your visibility. Now, when I say that even though there's a probability you can keep trying again, let's make another kind of example because I realize maybe the Zoltar thing isn't working for everybody. These are some coins. I don't travel a whole lot, but when I do, I'm grateful, so I save some few international coins as souvenirs. And I've got 5 of them here. I think some of these are Belize, some of these are euros. And, if I flip one coin, I've got a 50-50 chance it comes up right. If I flip 2 coins, I've got a 1 in 4 chance of it all being heads. 3 coins, 1 in 8, right? That's 1 over 2 to the third. I've got a 1 in 16 chance if it's 4 coins, 1 over 2 to the fourth. 1 in 32 chance it's all heads if I flip 5 coins at once that they're all going to come up heads. Now that is the chance if I have one turn, right? Now, when we play games, and so many of us who come into game development, or maybe if you're just watching my channel, we learn things in our lives from games. If it's not video games, maybe you play sports and learn things that way. But part of the definition of games is that they are bounded somehow in time and space. That the game has a start and an end. Maybe it only lasts for 9 innings, 4 quarters, 90 minutes. Maybe you only get 5 swings, get 3 turns, 3 rounds, 4 hands. until such and such happens, until you run through all the cards in the deck and sushi go. Whatever the competition might be, there is some sort of bound of when that game is over. And that's not how the probability works when we're applying for jobs. Because what if I told you that you're not limited by, can you get all 5 heads up in 15 seconds of flipping all of them at once? What if I told you you're not limited to, you can flip these 5 times, can you get them all to come up heads? Because you can lose those. You can flat out actually just lose those by not succeeding. What if I just said, what's the probability you could flip all 5 of these until all 5 came up heads? 1. Certainty, right? You could just keep flipping them again, all 5 of them, until they all come up heads. Now, it might take you a bunch of tries, right? Might take you 30-ish, might take you 100, might take you 5. We don't know. That's part of how probability works. And this is clearly a mechanical illustration, but the point is that when it comes to applying for jobs, the same thing's actually true. We're applying for promotions. Or even if, whatever the probability might be, and unlike flipping these coins, there's things you can do to improve those probabilities, there's still a probability at work. And as to whether or not you apply again is something that is up to you. Whether or not they all come up heads, out of my control. Whether I flip them again, up to me. Whether Zoltar gives me a fortune that I like on the first try, I don't know, random. Whether I decide to pump it again until I get the one I want out of it, yeah, that works. Works for an 8-ball too. Now, the thing about those is that even still, these are mechanical, right? Zoltar is a robot. He's an automaton, electromechanical, doesn't actually care about me. Human beings are different. Part of what makes business such a different field than some of these other disciplines that we maybe are used to keeping our professional focus in is that there's a human being making those judgment calls. And one of several things starts to happen if they see repeatedly the same person applying for the job, or the same person applying for the promotion, or the same person, for that matter, trying to get a certain kind of business to work. What starts to happen is one of 3 different things. Either they see that persistence, and they might offer some kind of feedback, right? Maybe the first time you applied, they kind of ghosted. They figured, I'm sure you applied other places. It's not our job to train you, whatever. But like, if you just keep applying there, and they just keep seeing your thing again, assuming this is not some giant company where a robot is essentially filtering out your resume first for some reason based on whatever criteria that HR has defined. If you're applying to a small enough company that a human being's looking at it, and they see your name coming up again and again, at some point they might be like, this person does not give up. We should contact them and tell them why we can't take them seriously so they will leave us alone and stop spamming us. Because there's a human being on the other side of that. And you might actually get some useful feedback like, look, I appreciate what you got going. Thank you for hitting us up. We appreciate your interest. We can't accept your company until you have the following. Get such and such credential, go get experience somewhere else or whatever, then come back to us. And I have seen situations happen where that feedback happened, someone went and did exactly what the company told them, came back and got the job they wanted. Because they finally pushed until they got back the feedback of the instructions of, follow these instructions, we'll hire you. Follow those instructions, they hired them, right? Another thing that happens is that when we start to see that kind of repeated feedback, is there's a piece at which, there's a meta-narrative going on there when that person keeps applying to the job, to the promotion, to starting the business, whatever, where you start to see, this person does not give up, right? And maybe instead of saying, well, we don't, let's tell them to stop spamming us, we start to read into that information that couldn't possibly be put on the resume of, they don't give up easy. And that is a trait that people want in their employees. That's something that they want in their managers. It's something they want in their promoted people. It's the kind of person who says, well, I didn't like the, card I was dealt, so I got another card. I didn't like the way the situation worked, so I tried again until it worked the way I needed to. I didn't give up on it. I stayed up and I kept working at it until I got the result I needed because I had a high bar for what it was going to take and where my standards were and where I needed to be. And I'm determined that that is what I'm after. And there's a friend of mine, she's a woman in game development who she spent 8 or 9 times interviewing at the same company she wanted to work at. She knew that's where her future was going to be. That's the job she wanted to have. She had done kind of the right things as well as anybody could to get that job, kept applying to it. And several times the company would be like, man, it's not there's anything wrong with you. It's like, oh, for this or the other reason, we just didn't work out this time. Or like, oh, we thought it was going to work, didn't work. Or at some point, they're like, I don't know, maybe it's not for you or whatever. And at some point, they made it work. She kept flipping those coins till they all landed heads. Now she has the job she wanted, the company she wanted. Because she just kept applying to it because she understood, again, it's not limited to you get one try, you get one attempt at it, you get 9 innings, you get 3 rounds or whatever. You go try again. Now, part of this comes up in the sort of business realm as well, is it's also they're facing the reality of any given game as a business artifact in the market with customers who are fickle. Minds can change, markets can change. you can't predict the trends ahead of time and so on, is a bit of a gamble. There's probability involved. You can do everything right, game can go poorly, you can do a lot of things wrong, and somehow the game is an enormous success. And the thing to remember about that is it's part of how we mitigate risk is not putting all of our eggs in one basket. This is part of how the publisher model exists. Literally, most creative projects, doesn't matter if it's music, doesn't matter if it's movies, doesn't matter if it's games, doesn't matter if it's books, whatever, most creative projects lose money. They don't ever recoup their cost. But what happens on the publisher layer is that they try to distribute that risk intelligently across a portfolio of enough games so the hits help offset the losses of the ones that they helped keep their lights on while they took their chance. Or it's the kind of thing that at a successful AAA studio, or I think Klifsky had an article about this some time ago, why he tries to count on, he doesn't just take all of his money from one successful game that he's had released and did well and bank it on the next one. He tries to figure out, how can I manage that cost efficiently over the next 7 projects to balance the risk that one of those 7 cannot pay off for the losses of the others. Is to think longer term than just one game at a time. Because part of why I could get another ticket out of Zoltar was $1. If Zoltar was $300 to play, A, I probably not have played at all. But B, I certainly wouldn't have gotten a second ticket. And this is the kind of thing why when I advocate rapid prototyping, it's about, okay, well, if we spend as little energy, time, or money, or risk as possible on trying to answer the question of what we want, we can take way more shots. We can flip our coins way more times until we're happy with the result. If the only way we're willing to take a try on an idea is to invest 2 years of our time and our life savings into it, you get one flip of those coins. Even if there's probability involved, even if you're doing good things to help your odds, it's maybe not as a survivable of a hit for a lot of situations. So there was a lot packed in there. Where some of these ideas came from, I was actually speaking this morning at LA Film School. I want to thank my supporters on patreon.com/gamketo who helped make it possible. That was an hour trip out to LA Film School. Spoke with the students for probably 2 hours solid, 45-minute drive back. Traffic slacked up on the way back. Thanks again, people who support me on that. But that was largely a discussion about business and game design for game developers, things I think more game developers need to hear. So we'll probably have some more content about that in the future, but that's part of what inspired today's message. Keep trying for stuff. Recognize that you are not limited in your amount of tries, your attempts. And I will say lastly that there is, in fact, a possibility, one of the outcomes. I think I might have said there's 3, I only gave you 2. A third outcome that can happen, kind of maybe where the previous video goes, is you might figure out that this isn't the right game for me to be playing. That the odds don't seem that great, or I'm not getting any sort of feedback, or maybe this is the wrong kind of place for me, because at some point you might start to read into that do I want to work at the kind of place that doesn't recognize that determination, that doesn't offer that kind of corrective feedback? Because that probably will show in the quality and caliber of other coworkers there. Just to say, it's a free world, hopefully for a lot of you out there. We get to choose which game we decide to play, and if you feel like maybe it's not a smart one to be playing, there's a degree of determination, there's also a degree of you can choose if you want to try another one. That's it for today. So thank you again for tuning in. I look forward to playing games in the future. Bye for now.